But ladies and gents, my friends, today's shiur, we are talking about, it's called From Faith to Flavor, the Process of Redemption. Remember last week we talked about as we're getting ready to re-experience Pesach, we have to get into the mode of Pesach, and therefore it's not about his story, it has to be about our story. So let's talk today a little bit more about making it our story, because we're just a few days away. In fact, a week from Wednesday, we'll all be sitting around the Seder table again, please God, with family and friends, celebrating this year's Festival of Freedom. We have 6 rooms left at the retreat, so if anyone who is still considering, and somebody's organized a bus independently, so if anyone still wants to consider joining us, there's an independent bus managed by guests. I prefer that because one year I managed the bus. You know what happens when I manage the bus? I'm trying to take care of the arriving guests and the bus and the food deliveries and whatever I forgot to take care of before because, I forget things. I should be attending Cynthia's classes. And then it becomes a big headache. So thank God one of the guests took it on. He's going to organize the bus. So if anybody's still considering six rooms, thank God. Anyways, putting that aside, I remember, it's sad to remember people are no longer with us. But Rebbetzin Ann Harris, she was at the retreat a few times. And one time when I organized the bus, she was very happy about it. But when it got a little bit disorganized, because some of the guests started calling the shots, you know what happens? We organized a bus. Member was our driver then. And then one of the guests says, no, stop here and go there. And he has a route from me. But now he's taking instructions from them. And I'm not on the bus. It was a little bit of havoc. So this is all part of the journey, the process of freedom, of liberation, and how we get there. It's all part of the process. Now, what does Seder mean? Order. You think that's an order? If I tell him one thing and someone else orders them to do something else? So the bare bones of the Seder is a very regimented performance of a series of mitzvahs and customs that are accompanied and guided, of course, by the readings of the Haggadah. Let me remind you, why do we read the Haggadah? Why do we need a Haggadah? So we can say the right words. I'm sure you knew that one by now. Yes, good. So the thing is, as many events in life, you wonder, do we need an order? Do we need a sequence? Does it have to be this way? Well, some things in life perhaps don't need a particular order, but a lot of things do. And just like the phone number you want to dial you're not gonna reach a person unless you follow the exact digits, you put them in your phone, and the website you want to go to. If you just missed that one little dot, the email will not reach its intended destination. Unless you are going to put in the correct details, the recipient won't get it. And the same thing with the Seder, except I'll say that Hashem does get it. I believe if you do your part, then Hashem will exactly. But we have to do our part. And it's called a Seder for that reason. It's called a Seder, as we discussed last week, that we need to try our best to follow it according to that order. As long as you did your part, Hashem will accept it. And that's Nirtzah. The final step of the Seder is Nirtzah, Hashem accepts it. But we do have to do our part. So rather than approach the general themes of Pesach and the Exodus directly, as we did in our previous classes last week, today, my friends, what we're going to do, I'm selecting 2 key components of the Seder today that we discussed last week, but we're going to zoom in on them. I know we're on Zoom right now and on YouTube and Facebook, but we're zooming in to these 2 particular areas of the Seder. Which 2 parts, what would you say are the 2 most important parts or the 2 most significant, highlighted, spotlighted parts of the Seder? Matzah and wine. Yes, you eat 3 matzahs, you drink 4 cups of wine. So those are pretty big highlights of the Seder. So today, and I want to say a huge thank you to Miriam for giving us electricity. Thank you, because Escom didn't. And yeah, for those watching, by the way, if not for Miriam giving us her amplifier, her inverter here, we wouldn't have electricity because around Johannesburg, or at least in this neighborhood, there's no electricity now. It is load shedding. Our foreigners have no clue unless they watch our shares, no clue what load shedding is. Load shedding is where we shed the load. Okay, so. And Gail for the cake and giving me internet. Yes, thank you. We have a internet right here. Thank you, Gail. And thank you for the cake. And thank you for the birthdays. So we got a lot going on here, Baruch Hashem. So ladies and gents, let's focus on the call it the seemingly trivial detail. Sometimes we think, who cares if it's 3 cups, 4 cups, 18 cups? How many? If you like wine, you'll drink as many cups of wine as you like. If you don't like wine, then maybe not. But if you're doing it as a mitzvah, as a divine commandment, then we realize we're doing it because Hashem told us to. And therefore, we understand that there's a deep significance to this. And along with it, it's an essential theme of the Exodus story, and that's why it's important that we follow it precisely. So let us understand what is the relevance, what's its significance to us today. And I think you'll be fascinated by some things that we might uncover in our presentation today. Yes, questions or comments or insights? Yes. Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Ah. All right, ladies and gents, where's Clive? There we go. Oh, you're good. Sitting closer. Clive always asks a good question. Why? So today I put a different question on the screen. Any rabbi will tell you that we get it all the time. When we talk about a mitzvah, oftentimes people ask this question. Where does it say so in the Torah? Where does it come from? Where do you get this from? Just tell me the source, right? You tell me a mitzvah, you tell me, where is it? Now, of course, it is an important question. We need to know when we're doing something. We need to know what is biblical, what is rabbinic. Is it a custom? You know, we say minhag Yisrael Torahi. Jewish customs are like the Torah. But someone else told me that the word minhag, which means custom, has the same letters as the word Gehenna. You know what Gehenna means? Purgatory, hell. So now my question is a minhag so beautiful like the Torah, or is it purgatory, hell? And then I figured out one year we did our retreat with someone else, and this other person, whenever it came to our customs, whenever it came to his customs, it was the holiest thing on earth. It was Torah Shabbat Shemayim. But if it was my custom or Chabad custom, he would say, where do you get that from? I said, now I figured out. If it's your custom, it's Torah. If it's my custom, it's Gehenna. My minhag, Gehenna. And oftentimes, we have our own mishigasim, and if it's our own mishigas, it's okay. Anyone else's, we can't tolerate. So, the thing is, you do have to know, where does this custom come from? Is there a basis to it? And therefore, when somebody's asking, where does it say so in the Torah? How do you like this guy I pulled off of Google? Yeah, he gives you the right to. Is he doing it good? Where does it say so in the Torah? And I get that question sometimes, and people ask us this. And when they're asking this, they want to know in the actual Torah. Don't tell me in the Talmud or the Mishnah, because that's not the Torah. That is part of the gamut of Torah. That's the oral Torah. They want to know, where's it written in the Chumash, right? Don't give me some latter day rabbinic creativity. Some rabbi decided, for example, I had to go to an unveiling yesterday on my way to Rustenburg. It was in Krugersdorp. So luckily it was on the way, except all the roads were blocked. I don't know what was going on. So we got there quite late. Anyways, so I told them, listen, you don't need a rabbi, you could go ahead, which is what they did. Because there was some roadblock, and I wound up going in circles and circles around to try to figure out how to get there. Anyways, I said, you don't need a rabbi. And they got someone else to do it because I was just getting stuck with these roadblocks. So here's something interesting. I told them, that unveilings is not a biblical commandment. It's not even a rabbinic enactment. Somebody once told me a rabbi made it up to make some extra cash. You need to give the rabbi another job. But now that they don't pay rabbis all that much for it, anyone could do it. The idea of, I just want to actually digress to that a second. It's not related to Pesach. But first of all, we're not supposed to do unveilings actually in the month of Nisan. That's one thing. Why? Because you're not supposed to do eulogies only under extenuating circumstances. Maybe there's family in town from overseas, and so you could do it without a big ceremony. The second thing is, there's no commandment to have an unveiling. There is a commandment to do hakamas matzeva. Hakamas matzeva literally means to erect a tombstone, a monument, as a sign of dignity and respect to the deceased. That we know that we walk in the cemetery, it's not just, somebody was buried there, but we know who it is who's interred in that space. So we put up a monument so that person is remembered. That has to be done. Jewish law requires it. In Jewish law, it says nothing about having a ceremony and saying Kaddish and the rabbi giving another eulogy and repeating what he said at the funeral or whatever it is. It's nice, nothing wrong with it, but you don't need to do it. So just putting that as a little side note. Anyways, what did I say we're talking about? We're going to talk about is this biblical or rabbinic what we do at the Seder? Now, let me give you examples of biblical mitzvahs. I'm going to throw some things out there. You tell me if it's biblical or rabbinic. Tefillin. Excuse me. Tefillin, biblical or rabbinic? Biblical, thank you. Tzimis, biblical or rabbinic? Neither. Good. Just testing you. What else? Matzah on Pesach. Is what? Biblical. It says so in the Torah. You see why we have to have this discussion. 4 cups of wine. No, there's no commandment in the Torah to have 4 cups of wine. It is rabbinical. You see, that's why it's important we have this discussion. What about Shabbos? Keeping Shabbos. Biblical, Torah. What about Erev Tafshilin? It's rabbinic. That was last week's shir. Just testing your memory. What about lighting Hanukkah candles? Rabbinic. Good. So you get the gist of it, okay? Now, the distinction is obviously, it's an important thing to know. Is the mitzvah rabbinic or biblical? At the end of the day, we do the rabbinic mitzvahs too. But it is important to know that although it is rabbinic or mishnaic or Talmudic, it is no less important than a mitzvah that is written outright in the Torah. We observe it with the same passion, enthusiasm, excitement, and authenticity. However, it's important for us to know these distinctions. Now, on top of that, there might be customs, like I threw in a tzimis. Maybe, tzimis might be your family custom, and whether you use prunes or I don't know what. My mother's tzimis was the best. She made it with fleisch, flanken. They even have flanken in this country? You do get it, okay. Nice cuts of meat in there. It was more of a meat dish. Either way, for many of us, this idea that rabbinic or biblical, what difference does it really make? We observe the commandments, we observe the mitzvahs, we observe our festivals. And the thing is that there are people. I think last week, when I was in Santon City and bumped into this guy who has a beard and tzitzis and a yarmulke. And I was like, gobsmacked. What is this guy? Right? And I spoke with him, and he tells me, first I gave him the benefit of the doubt, but when I saw him twice in the day with a big beard and tzitzis and a yarmulke, I said something's off. No yarmulke. So and I asked him, where's your yarmulke? He said, you tell me where it says in the Torah you have to wear a yarmulke. Could you tell me where it says in the Torah you have to wear a yarmulke? Why not? Because it's not in the Torah. You see another example? So there were, in the time of the temple, there was a group called Tzedukim, or Sadducees, and another group later on called Karaim, or Karaites. This guy told me he is a Karaite Jew. I never knew they still exist, but they do. And there are even modern day thinkers today who certainly, this argument has proved a powerful springboard for various thinkers with challenging traditional Judaism. What's the source? What's the root? When I was doing my what do you call it? My master's degree a few years ago, one of the big parts that I hated the most about it was the referencing. I don't even understand why they do that. And you have the different methods of reference and how you do it. And if you're following the Harvard way or the Princeton way or the Oxford way and each one has got its own mishigas, and you have to follow it. You have to, whether it's the publisher first and then the year and then the name of the author and the page number and yada, 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 and how you do it and what comes first and what's in brackets and what's in parentheses, right? People want to know what's the source. And when you're writing a dissertation or you're writing a thesis or any other assignment, case study that they give us for one's master's degree or doctorate, anyone want to help me out with a doctorate? Not yet. I need a little break still from the master's. Then you have to learn these references. By the way, I don't know what's going to be in the future because I believe today that there's AI and all that artificial intelligence can probably write a better dissertation than myself at least. And I wonder what that's going to lead to and how they're going to deal with it at universities. It's not plagiarism, is it? So what are they going to do? I wonder what the future holds for all that.
But you still need an editor to edit.
Yeah.
AI.
But sometimes the AI could edit better than we can. You know something? I showed you guys a video a few months ago. You might recall. I won't show it again today, but I could show it another time. There's a lady in New York. Her name is Hannah Sharfstein. She's a friend of my mother-in-law. She's probably similar age to some of you. She's probably in her 70s today. When she was doing her master's degree as a young lady in her 20s in Brooklyn College, guess who edited her thesis or dissertation, whatever she was writing then? Not me. I wasn't around. This is in the 1960s. The Rebbe. It was fascinating. And that was the video I played. The Rebbe took an interest. She had a meeting with the Rebbe. She told the Rebbe about her dissertation. She was writing about the life of a Hasidic Jew versus, the normal life. And I remember a few lines the Rebbe gave her during that. First of all, when she said she has a deadline, the Rebbe said, rather use the word due date. It's a more refreshing word because deadline has a very negative connotation to it. Due date is a sign of birth. So your paper is due by a certain date, not the deadline. She said the Rebbe told her, the Rebbe changed some words around in the dissertation where she wrote about like the challenges of a Hasidic lifestyle. And the Rebbe took the word Hasidic out because he said every life has challenges, not just Hasidic life. It makes it sound as if being Hasidic is so challenging. Any life has challenges, whether you're Hasidic or not. Trying to recall some of the other things, but there was very interesting and insightful edits the Rebbe gave her, which is incredible that he took the time of his very busy schedule to help a young lady out with her dissertation. I just found it fascinating. Anyways, let's remain focused on our point. The point I'm making is our sages are understood to have been people of great insight. We talk about the Rebbe's insight. There were many, many great Rebbes of various generations, and these were people of great character and even divine inspiration, but even disregarding any of the aspersions of rabbinic corruptibility or fallibility, as King Solomon says, there's no tzaddik in this world that does only good and never sins. There is a thought. Judaism as a religion is about doing what God wants and acting in accordance with a divinely ordained code. So isn't Judaism at its core what God has directly asked of us? And if that's the case, what role does the rabbinic innovation of any rabbi? And when I'm talking about rabbi, I'm not talking about a shmo like me who studied in Pretoria for a year and got the title rabbi. And 20 years later, I'm making you meshugah here. I'm talking about real, authentic, genuine, the real deal. Sages of the Talmud, right? So how could they fabricate Jewish customs and laws? By the way, I'm on their side. I'm just trying to build up this question. So today, I want to show you that not only is rabbinically derived law, as we're going to see, for example, at the Seder, one of the mitzvahs that we do is drinking wine. It's a crucial element of our Judaism, but in a sense, it possesses a quality that, in fact, biblical law, as embodied by the matzah, in fact, doesn't necessarily have the same qualification. So when somebody argues that it's in the Chumash is very important. I'm not going to argue. The Chumash is the most fundamental work of Judaism. It's the Bible. Okay? It's the Torah. And the matzah is written in the Torah. But we don't only eat matzah at our Seder. What else do? We also follow the rabbinic enactment of drinking the wine. And so I want to show you today that while the biblical commandment, as you can see now on the screen, is of paramount importance, and it certainly is. Oh, there's people in the waiting room and they didn't pay attention. I got carried away. Sorry, guys. That this is also an important mitzvah, and not just important. I will highlight to you today the significance of it. So let's start with the biblical source of matzah, okay? Matzah is in the Torah. Where in the Torah? Can you see on the screen? It is in the book of Shemos, Exodus, chapter 12, verse 18. The Torah says, Barishim Baba Asher Lamchadesh, in the first month, on the 14th day of the month, Teichlu matzahs, you should eat matzahs until the 21st of the month of Nisan in the evening. In the diaspora, till what day do we do this? 22nd, very good. So although the verse here does not mention, it tells us you have to eat matzah, right? What doesn't it tell us? How much matzah? Okay, if you want, you could go downstairs where there's a wonderful fun activity going on, the Mata Matzah Bakery. You can watch how the matzah is baked and see the whole process. Very simple ingredients, flour and water, that's it. But the Torah is telling us here that we have to eat matzah, right? But it doesn't tell us how much. Now, for some families, assembling the 3 matzahs has become a whole ritual itself. Each year, people wait with bated breath as they start taking out the matzah. I have, here, please God, either at the end of this week, or actually I was intending to do this on Monday, is that we will give shmora matzah to our senior attendees, that you can have matzah for home. But if you already got a delivery to your home, please don't double dip, because we have a limited stock. So if you already got delivered to your house, then please let me know, and we'll make sure that then we won't give you, we're giving only to the attendees who come here, and those who are on our list, of course, as well. We've given out hundreds and hundreds of matzahs. Sorry. Yes. Yep. Oh no, the ingredients are a huge issue. There cannot be any other ingredients other than flour and water. The time is crucial. We're getting there. You're jumping the gun. Sorry. The time is very crucial. It has to be within 18 minutes, the entire process of the baking. But you can't add other ingredients into matzah. Okay. All right. So, my dear friends, my suggestion, at least what I do for a retreat, is that we separate the matzahs. You need 3 whole matzahs. I'm going to get to that discussion in a moment, what the importance of the 3 matzahs is, okay? But it's difficult sometimes if your matzahs are coming all the way from Ukraine, as our matzahs do, to make sure that they all arrive here in one piece. So you have to open the box now and start sifting through it to see that your matzahs are actually all whole. I see somebody's walking with a box. Is that Aviva walking with a box of matzah? Have you opened the box to see, are they all whole and complete in there? We know they're holy. We don't know if they're whole though. Yes, ma'am.
In my house, opening that box of matzah before the house is.
Oh, in any house, that's true. So before the place is completely kosher for Pesach, it should not be opened. Now, once you open it, now we have to go through it and see that every matzah is complete. You can have broken matzahs, But on the table, you need 3 whole matzahs. Let's look at it right here. This is the Alter Rebbe. Alter Rebbe, biblical rabbinic. Rabbinic. He was a great rabbi. He was the founder of the Chabad movement. He's the author of the Tanya and the Shulchan Aruch. And here's what he says. I put the screen for you on. I put the text on the screen. I'm sorry for all our Zoom and participants. Something keeps blocking my screen. I don't know what it is. I have a feeling it might be related to this, to the internet. But if I take away Gail's piece, then you won't have internet. You just have to bear with me that my screen keeps getting blocked. Yes, Rav. What's that? Yeah, but we're very lucky that Miriam brought an inverter and Gail brought a internet because mine is run out. So Baruch Hashem, we have some internet. Oh, Gail? We tried, by the way, Miriam did. She gave us the inverter one day. Shlomo tried to connect it. It was too much. L'chaim, but thank you. So now, my friends, the point here is, you see, rabbinical, Rabbi Katz, one of the greatest rabbis, not just in this country, by the way, globally. Yeah, you should hear his voice on the videos that the Chabad gives out. We're very privileged here, the rabbis we have in this community. I don't even know if we realize. I think Cynthia knows. So now, let's read what the Alter Rebbe tells us in Shulchan Aruch. Once we've eaten, excuse me. Once you've eaten the vegetable, which vegetable? The karpas, right? Yaviu lefnei shomer Haggadah. They bring before the person who says the Haggadah. How many matzahs? 3 matzahs, gimel matzahs. So you should say the Haggadah over these 3 matzahs. But again, where does the number 3 come from? Is that rabbinic or biblical? Doesn't say in the Torah the number 3. Now, surely one piece of matzah based on the Torah's commandment. Let's go back to the Torah's commandment for a second. What does the Torah say you should eat? Matzahs. Okay, fine. Matzahs is plural. How much is plural? At least 2. In fact, every Shabbos, how many challahs do we eat in our Shabbos dinner? 2. Why 2? 2 for Lechem Mishnah, to remember the double portion of manna that we receive from heaven. By the way, I won't be here the Shabbos after Pesach, but I will tell you about it now because usually people ask me about it. There's a custom on the Shabbos after Pesach that people bake a special kind of challah. Some people bake a key inside it, and other people bake the challah in the shape of a key. It's called shlisel challah. You've ever heard of it? Never heard of it. It's not biblical. It's not even rabbinic. It's a custom that some people have. What's the significance behind it? The significance is that the Jewish people started to receive the manna falling from heaven on the Shabbos after Pesach, the year after the Exodus. Was it the year after the Exodus? Or was it immediately after the Exodus? They were complaining after the splitting of the sea. They needed food to eat. They were running out of provisions. Right after they left Egypt. They took food from Egypt. How much food did they have? It lasted a week. Now they needed food. So to commemorate the manna that fell from heaven as the key to our blessings, there is a custom that some people have. They call it shlisel challah. They make challah baked as a key to remember that the key to our blessings is Almighty God. And now to remember that on a Friday they receive a double portion of manna, we put 2 challahs at our Shabbos table. So now I understand why we have 2 matzahs, but now we have to understand why 3. Yeah. You don't need any. There's no custom to have, there's no law to have shlisel. It's a custom some people have. Shlisel is a usual Yiddish word for key. Not to be confused with shtisel. Shtisel is a Netflix series about life in Israel.
I know that we have 3 matzahs.
Yeah.
1 to the Kohanim, 1 to the Levi,
Yeah.
and 1 for Israel.
Yeah.
I'm not sure whether it's the people.
Again, rabbinic. Again, it's custom. But we know the custom is 3 matzahs, right? Everybody has 3 matzahs at their Seder. Whether ideally for the Seder, you should have shmura matzah. You could get 1 from Chabad house. So either you could buy the other two, or you could use a machine otherwise. I mean, don't use the machine, but the machine matzah. Ideally, you have shmura matzah. Now, the thing is, there are a number of reasons for the three matzahs. One, Miriam just told us, symbolizing the Kohen Levi Yisrael. 3 tribes. There were 12 tribes, but there's 3 types of Jews in those tribes. The Levites were divided into 2, the Kohanim and Leviim. Let's read it quickly on the screen, because the truth is there's a lot I want to talk about, so we're going to go through this quite quickly. All right, so why do we need the 3 matzahs? No more or less, to take care of a couple halachic considerations. Let's read it as it says in the Shulchan Aruch. Although one must partake of 2 complete loaves of bread, lechem mishnah, like we do on Shabbos, and every Yom Tov, on the night of Pesach, excuse me. On the night of Pesach, however, some say that 1.5 pieces of matzah is sufficient. These authorities believe that when the sages interpreted the scriptural term of matzah, poor man's bread, to mean that the matzah is to be broken, as a pauper is accustomed to broken. Remember last week I told you the story about the broken wheel? Yes? So they meant to decrease from the lechem mishnah, so that one of the 2 requisite pieces is to be non-whole. Do we do this? Do we break the matzah? We do. But do we only have 1.5 matzahs? How many do we have after we break it? 2.5. Why? Because there are others who say that the sages meant to add on to the lechem mishnah, so that aside from the 2 pieces of matzah one is obligated to partake of on any festival, there must be an additional incomplete piece for the poor man's bread. This is the widespread custom, and one should only deviate from it in times of need. So times of need, maybe for whatever reason you can't get a hold of matzah, all right, then in that case, you'll be allowed to have 1.5. But ideally, you should have at least 2. We're going to break the 3rd one, so you have 3. So here's a legalistic thing, and fairly technical. The Torah's description of the matzah as lechem oni, poor man's bread. Why is it poor man's bread? Well, after you wind up paying for it, you're broke. Indicates that the piece of matzah used in the Seder has to be incomplete, at least one of them. But when you make the bracha over bread, in this case, it's going to be matzah, it has to be over 2 matzahs to be called the lechem mishnah, the double portion of man that fell from heaven in honor of Shabbos, as we do every week to commemorate that experience in the desert. So therefore, to cover both bases, the sages came up with the simplest solution. What is that? 3 matzahs. All right, so far so good. So take 3 matzahs. My screen keeps getting turned off. 2 of them, the top and the bottom, are the lechem mishnah, and the 3rd, the middle matzah, is going to be broken by yachatz, and that's going to be, half of it is going to be put aside for the afikoman. The other half we call the poor man's bread that we're using, or the pauper's bread that is being used for the story that we're telling over about our slavery when we were like poor people. The afikoman, on the other hand, is symbolic of wealth, of nobility. Why? A poor person only eats. A slave only gets to eat when they are allotted the opportunity to do so, and they're starving, hungry. A wealthy person can eat anytime they like, which is why the afikoman is eaten on a full stomach. Okay, we've covered the matzah so far. Make sure your matzah is covered, by the way, especially if you're at a Chabad Pesach Seder. Otherwise, somebody might shoot you. But I have to tell you a side story on that. You know, in Chabad, we don't mix anything with the matzah, right? Nothing. Once at the previous Rebbe's Seder table, there were guests. One of the guests took his matzah and was mixing it with the gefilte fish and chrein. You know, people like to have chrein. I used to sing, "Oh, Bubby, you know what I like? A Shabbos tish with gefilte fish and a bissel chrein on the side, and the chillin in the pot, and the kugel nice and hot. Oh, this is a nice Yiddish Shabbos meal. We like our chrein on the side. Now on Pesach, your chrein is without the beets in it for the maror. But when it comes to the fish, you're allowed to have grain with beets on the side. And this Yid, sitting at the previous Rebbe's Seder table, was taking his matzah and mixing it with the fish and grain. So somebody turned to him and said, hey, you know that's not allowed in the Chabad, like, not just in Chabad, like, this is the Rebbe. So the Rebbe spoke up, and the Rebbe said, better the matzah should be read with a grain than his face should be read with embarrassment. So just to bear that in mind, sometimes we get caught up with the law and forget about the spirit of the law. Now, the thing is, the matzahs are not the only mitzvah on the night of Pesach with a specific quantity attached. It is a mitzvah instituted by the rabbis to drink, as you could see, besides for the matzahs, which we discussed, there's 3 matzahs, 2 whole and 1 for the poor person. What else do we have at the Seder table? Go back a second. What else do you see there? 4 cups of wine. Okay, my friends, 4 cups of wine or grape juice or whatever, Now, let me ask you, if we're drinking 4 cups of wine, where did that come from? Remember the order. First one is for Kiddush. Second one is for the Magid, right? We refill before V'hisha Amda. V'hisha Amda Lavoisahinu. We drink that at the end of Magid, reclining for all of them. The third cup is at benching, and the 4th cup, Shana Haba B'Yerushalayim, next year in Jerusalem, L'chaim. Okay, so we drink 4 cups of wine, and if you want to drink in between, Gesundheit as well. Let us understand what is this about, says Maimonides. Each and every one, both men and women, must drink 4 cups of wine on this night. This number should not be reduced. Even a poor person who's sustained by charity should not have fewer than 4 cups. How much is each cup? A quarter of a lug. Our sages tell us, what is that? Approximately 86 milliliters. If also we're supposed to drink what's called roiv kais, the majority of the cup. So if you're drinking the majority of the cup, then you want to have a small cup, otherwise you might get drunk. A cup like Stephen's holding will get you intoxicated very quickly. All right? Stephen, if you're going to drink 4 cups of wine of that size, oy vey, you might be like Beryl the Shikar in the other story I told, right? So here too, we can ask the same question. Why 4 cups of wine? Where did that come from? Sages tell us 4 cups of wine, but why 4? Why not 3? Why not 5? Why not 18 or 40? I think we should drink 40 cups of wine to remember the 40 years we were stuck in the desert. Who came up with this number 4? Why 4? Why not another number? Where did it come from? Does it say so in the Torah? Pardon? We won't get drunk from, it depends what kind of wine you're drinking. I could think of some wines that you get drunk after the first cup. On a regular Shabbos, we only drink 1 cup of wine. So why did the sages feel the need that they added another 3 cups for Pesach? Well, we'll get to it. So once again, there's a number of explanations that have been offered in halachic and midrashic literature from the sages. And perhaps the best of these is that the 4 cups were instituted to correspond with the 4 expressions of redemption. What are the 4 expressions of redemption that are used in the Torah to describe the impending exodus? What is it? Well, the Torah says, V'hotzeiti, I will extract you. V'hitzalti, I will save you. God says, V'ga'alti, I will redeem you. V'lakachti, and I will take you to me as a people, as a nation. So 4 cups of wine corresponding to the 4 expressions of redemption. Now, this is a very powerful symbolism of even the smallest detail of the Seder. You could see everything has a significance to it. And undoubtedly, it's fascinating to know the background, but something seems missing. Let's put it this way. Doesn't associating the 4 expressions of redemption with the wine seem somewhat arbitrary? Sure, the Gemara suggests that some element of the Seder represents the 4 expressions is important. It's fair. It's important that we remember the 4 expressions of redemption. But my question to you is, why with the wine? Why not with the matzah? Why don't we eat 4 pieces of matzah? Unlike the wine, which is rabbinic, the matzah is biblical. So why not, if you're putting something to be 4, now personally, I'm glad they used 4 cups of wine and not 4 matzahs. You think I need 4 matzahs? I'd rather get fat on the lamb chops and the veal and duck or whatever other delicacies we're having than on more starch. What do we call it? Carbs of matzah. Yeah. Maybe.
Tongue in cheek.
Yeah.
You have 4 cups of wine because wine is spirit and wine lifts your spirit so that you can connect to spiritual connection in those 4 expressions.
That was very spiritual. Spiritual, like Sidnam Shul that advertises spiritual. So that was very spiritual.
But that just comes up.
Well, let me give you something even more so. My question is why the wine specifically? Miriam, you gave a very good suggestion. Now I'm going to share with you what we say in the Haggadah. Let's put the Haggadah text on the screen. Oh, it's not there. Okay, sorry. I don't know what I put in. Let me share with you. Let me remind you something we say in the Haggadah. By the way, if you reorganize all these letters, you'll have all the words of the Haggadah, I promise you. Okay? There's nothing in the Haggadah that's not in these letters. Okay? Says the Haggadah, in the Haggadah, next Wednesday night, we're going to read, we ask ourselves a question, this matzah that we eat, for what reason? And we answer, because the dough of our fathers did not have time to become leavened. From the King of Kings, the Holy One, blessed be, revealed himself to our ancestors and redeemed them. Therefore, it said they baked the matzahs from the dough that they had brought out of Egypt because it was not leavened, for they had been driven out of Egypt and could not delay, and they had not prepared any other provisions. So therefore, they left in such a hurry, such a haste. Now, let me ask you, if that's the case, since the matzah is such an important highlight, and there's such symbolism and significance to the matzah, and since it represents the overall redemption from Egypt, shouldn't the 4 expressions of redemption be related to the matzah more than the wine? Why couldn't each person make a matzah for themselves? I don't think it's such a difficult thing to figure out. Not so hard to bake a matzah. Matzah is the easiest thing to bake. I'm sure there are other logistics that were more difficult. Yeah.
That question came from the man.
From?
The man.
Yes.
You should ask a woman that question.
Oh, let's hear.
Because if you're running a household, especially in those days,
Yeah.
where Spar and Pick and Pay, etc., were not available,
Yeah.
in the evening before you went to bed, you mixed your bread
There you
dough
go.
so that you could have bread in the morning.
Right.
It was
But the matzah
wine,
wasn't allowed to
because they had to leave
because they had to
at
in a hurry.
midnight.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
didn't have the time to.
Exactly. But somebody brought my wife a Dutch oven. You ever heard of a Dutch oven as a present? Now, you think baking challah got any easier? No, you got to do it 48 hours in advance. You have to let it rise. A whole ganze Meise, a whole Geschichte.
Because they didn't have that time.
Yeah. So there was no time for it to rise. Now, if our tradition specifically calls for 3 matzahs and 4 cups of wine, obviously there has to be a reason for it. And as we shall hopefully see soon, we're only going to go for 20 more minutes. The Torah, there's no lunch today, by the way, because Vusi was kidnapped to go with my daughter in her class on Shabbaton. So there's no lunch today, unfortunately. I apologize. You can have another piece of cake, as what was her name? Marie Antoinette said. If there's no bread, let them eat cake. On Pesach, there's no bread, so you eat matzah cake. All right. So let us see the significance of numbers, and let's learn something very interesting. What is it about? And now I'm going to take you into numerology. Okay. So obviously, there's nothing by chance. It's not just a technicality that the Seder calls for 3 matzahs specifically and 4 cups of wine, but rather the concept of the matzah, the overreaching theme that it represents, is specifically expressed through the number 3 And likewise, the purpose of the mitzvah of drinking 4 cups of wine is particularly finds its fullest expression in 4 cups. So we have to understand why that is. And therefore, my friends, let us go a little bit into the teachings of Chassidus. Chassidus gives us a deeper understanding. Are we ready? Good. Put on your thinking caps, your yarmulke or shaitel, give it a nice twist or turn, and let's go. And if you drink a little wine, it'll be a little easier to understand. So to fully appreciate why the numbers associated with the matzah and wine are what they are, we first have to better understand the numbers themselves. What does 3 represent and what does 4 represent, okay? Normally we think of numbers as just empty constructs, right? It's just a system that we use to measure and count things. Okay, makes sense? But in Torah, and especially in Hasidic thought, numbers have meaning. Excuse me. Pardon? In and of themselves. And it's often understood as expressing a particular idea or theme. And you might be familiar with the concept of gematria, yes? Or you're familiar with that song we sing on Pesach? Echad mi yodea, Echad ani yodea, Echad Elokeinu, 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 Sheba shamayim uvaretz. So there's one God in heaven and earth. I could sing it to you also in Russian and English. Zero, ah, ser, Who knows 1? You know the song? Who knows 10? I know 10. 10 are the Aseret Hadibrot, and 9 are the months for the babies born, 8 of the days of the bus chop chop, 7 of the days of the week, 6 of the books of the Mishnah, 5 of the books of the, 4 are the mothers, 3 are the, and 2 other books that Moses brought, 2 of the tablets. Good, you're paying attention. We have to get, don't forget, 1 is Hashem. There you go. Atazai. Could you do it in Russian? Adin, 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 unazbog, shto na zembe, Adin, unazbog, služba nasha družba, nasha еврейская, služba nasha družba, nasha еврейская. Which version do you like better? Hebrew, Russian, or English? I think the Russian tune is like takes the cake, right? Anyways, my point is this is an important song for what we're going to be saying here, because we have to understand what's the significance of these numbers. As you can see on the screen, I put the Hebrew letters of the Aleph Bet, right? Now, I actually there's a songwriter named Harry Nilsson. Anyone heard of him? Harry Nilsson wrote a song. I can't sing it to you, but it goes like this. 1 is the loneliest number that you'll ever do. 2 can be as bad as 1. It's the loneliest number since the number 1. Now, he was drawing from the obvious sense of solitude or loneliness expressed by the number 1. Now, he must have been working with the conventional, very limited perspective on numbers. But when it comes to numbers in Judaism, we have 2 other tools to work with. When numbers are no more than a means of counting, then obviously 1 is simply 1, right? 1. But we know 1 is Hashem, 1 is Hashem. And 2 is not just 2, right? We look at each number, it has a significance. Every number, by the way, is not just a number. What does 1 mean in English besides for 1? What? But in Hebrew, the word Aleph, which is the letter for number 1, is actually also a word. So each numerical or each digit, whatever you call this, each letter, which is also a number, the letters of the Hebrew alphabet have traditionally been used for this purpose and used in numerous ways. So therefore, Aleph is number 1, and Bet is 2, and Gimel is 3, and Dalet is 4. I won't go further because those are the only numbers I'll be looking at for now. Yes. Another tool unique to the Jewish take on numbers is actually also analyzing their shape. If you want, I can give you a crash course in Hebrew. I usually like to do it before Rosh Hashanah to freshen up everyone's Hebrew reading before the high holidays.
Those people who come to our previous, not our Facebook session, the previous session, as a teacher, I'm sitting here and I'm thinking, I wonder if people remember all this.
Well, each of the letters, if you come back on Thursdays to Rebbetzin and Miriam's classes, you will get a fascinating take on the light of what do you call it? The light of the letters? So you'll get, what's that? Letters of light and life. You'll get an understanding of it. So let's just take an example here. The Gemara tells us something very interesting. It says the rabbis told Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, children have come to the study hall and said things the likes of which were not said in the days of Joshua ben Nun. You heard of Joshua ben Nun? He was the successor of Moses. Okay, let's go back for a second to the previous slide. They said, Aleph, the top letter. No, it's part of the design. Sorry, it's in there. I'm sorry. I put it in as the design. I can't edit it now. I'm sorry. I didn't realize it will be so blocking. Should have thought of it better before. My apologies. Anyways, Aleph Bet means Aleph Bina, which means learn wisdom. Gimel Dalid means Gomel Dalim, which means what? Show kindness to the poor. Now, why is the foot of the Gimel stretched towards the Dalid? Look at the Gimel and Dalid. Look at it. Do you see? It's like, it's as if he's walking over. Why? What does Gimel mean? Gomel means to give, to bestow. So the kids would say, because the Gimel is running, the giver is running after the Dalid, the destitute. So Gimel is a giver, giving gelt, you know what gelt is? To the Dalid, which is in Hebrew, Dalid is poor. And in English, you could just say destitute, because that's also another word for poor, and it fits with a D. Okay? So Gomel Dala means you don't just give to the poor. We actively seek out the poor. So that's why the kids explained why the leg of the Dalid is stretched out towards the Gimel, because the poor person is making himself available in some way. Not sure exactly how. But the point is both the word and the shape, the letter Gimel and Dalid. Think of the Gimel, the number 3, which we're going to discuss in a moment, and Dalid, which is 4. We have to understand both of them. What is its connection? So if you're looking at it in sequence, the Talmud is saying these 2 letters represent, again, Gomel Dalim, giving to the destitute. Giving is Gimel, Dalid is destitute. Okay? Or giving and receiving. Let's see how that fits in. So Chassidus tells us, you see this guy here? He is walking towards the poor person. Took some time to figure out how to find a guy to look exactly like that. You see the Gimel, and now you have the Dalid. Do they look somewhat? Okay, that took a little bit of a stretch to find these characters and make them look. This is what I waste my time doing late at night, finding how to make these guys look right. You can tell I didn't do this. I do better these days. I made this slide a while ago. So the connection between the letters Gimel and Dalid and the notions of giving and receiving is not only based on the forms and words used to identify them, rather the notion of giving is inherently connected with the number 3 itself. And likewise, the number 4 itself represents the notion of receiving. And perhaps it's because of this deeper connection that the signs for the numbers 3 and 4 possess the characteristics that the Talmud points out. So what does this mean? What might giving have to do with the letter Gimel, which is the number 3? And what might receiving have to do with the letter Dalid, the destitute? And what is the numerical value of Dalid? 4. There's obviously a deep reason. I'm going to take you now into a mimer of the Rebbe Rashab. When I was in yeshiva, let me tell you, I would get a headache learning this mimer, maybe because I wasn't a good student. But this past week, a book was published about my great-grandfather. His name was David Ducker, and he was a student of the Rebbe Rashab, and I believe he did all the understanding of this mimer for me. He left nothing for me to understand of this mimer. But I will try together with you to understand this mimer and a little insight and thought from it. So I'm going to invite you into this Hasidic thought. Let's read it. I'm going to read it to you, and then let's try to unpack it together. All right. Yes. Yes, it is Hemshech Samach Vav. Sefer HaMamarim 5666. That is 1906. Thank you. Rosh Hashanah. Maybe it's 1905. 1905, because it was Rosh Hashanah Mimer. All right. So here I'm going to read it to you. Says the Rebbe Rashab. We have to sing it in a particular Hasidic melody. That's the way you learn a mimer. Giving you a taste of it. Well, an analogy for this is the transmission of a concept or a thought from a great master to a humble student. Got it? Great master, humble student. The teacher is so immeasurably greater than his student that the student is unable to receive the concept as it exists in the broad mind of the teacher. Therefore, says the Rebbe Rashab, the student, I'll get back to these letters in a moment. Therefore, the student, I lost the place. Give me a second. Okay, therefore, the teacher must contract the idea to one point that is theoretically accessible to the student recipient. How's it, Taryn? Welcome back. Good to see you. Miracle Drive coming up or something? I know. Good to see you. There's an abstract of everything that will be transmitted to the recipient. We'll dissect this in a second. Let's first read everything he says, and then we'll unpack it. All right. Says the Rebbe Rashab, since this point is still in general terms, it is still beyond the comprehension of the recipient. Let's make this practical for a second. Let's say you were a student of Einstein. I could think of one or two people in this room who would have loved to be students of Einstein. And maybe they are students of Einstein, even if they never met him, right? So now let's say you were Einstein's student. Do you think in the first time you sat down in Professor Einstein's class that you would understand everything he's saying? No. The details, this abstract point, Einstein has to take this deep concept of, relativity and E equals MC squared. They didn't teach us that in yeshiva, I promise you. Yeah, they taught us these mimers. Still trying to figure that out too. Anyways, they have to be explicated so that they can come within the recipient's grasp. What does Einstein need to do to teach you these deep ideas that are difficult to comprehend? Says the Rebbe Rashab, all of this takes place within the giver, teacher, who plans out in his mind the details of this concept. If Einstein wants to take these esoteric or complex ideas that in his mind is clear, but you as a student need to understand, he can't just babble it off to you as he understands it. Like one who imagines in his mind how to bring an idea into speech. You have a thought. What do you need to do before you can take that thought and put it into writing? I have to write an article today for the Jewish Report. I have to first think what I want to write. Then I have to actually write it and then submit it, right? After that is the transmission to the recipient, when the concept is delivered tersely, without all the detail imagined by the teacher. So now, although Einstein understands all the theories, I, as the student, have a grasp than I could. But if I were a student and I never got a general education, and I never took classes in science and whatever, physics, he would have a much harder time teaching me than teaching you. It's not to say that I'm necessarily stupid. Maybe I am. But if I didn't ever understood this stuff, Einstein has a harder job now condensing those concepts in order for me to understand them. Everyone understand? Yeah. Therefore, says the Rebbe Rashab as follows. If we analyze this type of transmission, by the way, when I was taking my master's course and we learned the concept of pedagogy and andragogy, it's exactly this idea. A teacher might have complex ideas that they want to teach to the students. It takes work to now dissect and analyze and work through those ideas in order to transmit it to the student, right? So now let's understand how that works. There's 4 stages, the Rebbe Rashab says. So let's go through them. The first step of this process, the teacher has to focus on the particular subject at hand. Of course, the teacher has the broader and deeper knowledge of the subject than the student is capable of understanding. So what does the teacher do? The teacher has to do whatever they can and understand what the student will grasp, right? And make it understandable for the student. So the teacher continues to focus on that point and now turns to develop it, teasing out the idea by elucidating the concept in this way, internally in the in the teacher's mind. And the teacher tries to turn this abstract concept into something more accessible. Now comes the class. The teacher has to actually transmit the information, right? Even though the teacher is simply relaying the information that they know, this is still considered a distinct stage of the chain of transmission. And it's impossible, to fully capture the idea. I'm sure there's a lot more depth to E equals MC squared than just writing it on a board, as a crazy example. So now articulating a concept both turns into something more tangible, because you're talking about it, while limiting it to the particular words that you're using, because you want your student to understand it. Now, in the final stage, we enter a new dimension. Now comes the world of the student, the recipient. And this, so far we have the idea, the development of the idea, and the articulation of the idea. 3. Now comes the 4th. What's the 4th? The student who needs to process the idea. Okay? The student is sitting there. A student simply sits and listens to a lecture. Did they understand? Did they get anything? The student needs to process that information. They need to develop and absorb it in their own terms, according to their own understanding. That's the 4th step of the process. That's the recipient. So this conceptualization is not limited to intellectual transmission or even to people. Any giving that requires an act of transmission will involve all 4 of these steps. If, for example, someone wants to express their feelings towards a loved one, right? Say, as a parent, I want to express my love to my child, okay? So it will involve these 4 basic steps. First, summoning up and focusing on, the positive feeling. Then thinking how to articulate that love in the best way for that child. Because thank God when you have 7, 8 or more, as many children as you have, each one is unique, right? And each one's going to need their own specific way, how you're going to express it to them. So the first thing is summing up and focusing on that feeling. Then thinking how to articulate that love, whether it's through a letter, through a gift, through another medium. You ever read, there's a book called I'm forgetting, what is it called? 5 levels of love? 5 kinds of love. So it's about then the actual act of transmission, actually saying it. But that's not all. The gesture now depends on how it's being received by the intended recipient. So if you want to take a photo on your phone and send it to a friend, we'll still have the same 3 steps. Okay, first, my phone is going to take the picture. Okay, let's test this out. We're taking the picture. Then we're going to convert it into the appropriate assortment, however the phone does that. Then we're going to send it off. But if I send a picture to somebody who doesn't receive it, or I sent it to the wrong number, nobody's going to get it. So you have the same steps. Point of all this is that the act of giving involves 3 stages, and the act of receiving is the 4th stage. Now, I'm going to ask for 10 minutes to let me finish my concepts, and I'll take all questions. Okay. I want to connect it to the song we were singing before of Who Knows What. Because as it happens, all of this sheds light on a very curious anomaly of Jewish tradition of this song, Echad Miyodeh, that we sing at the Seder. Okay? Since we're speaking about numbers, let's understand what is the significance of the numbers 3 and 4. What do we say? 4 are the mothers and 3 are the fathers, says the Gemara. Only 3 are called the patriarchs. What about the 12 tribes? No, they're the 12 tribes, they're not the patriarchs, right? What about Joseph? He was a great person. Why is he not included? No, there's 3 mothers and there's 3 fathers and there's 4 mothers, and that's all. Okay? So what is that about? Says the Gemara. Have you ever wondered? I mean, why can't others be part of this count of 3 and 4? Why 3 fathers? Why 4 mothers? There were other great ladies. Is Miriam can't be one of the matriarchs? What about the prophetess Devorah? Right? Why can't they be part of this count? Pardon? I skipped the mimer here. Sorry. Okay, we're going to get to this in a moment. So let's just first, I forgot to show you my slides. Giving and receiving. 1 is the idea, 2 is contracting it, 3 is teaching it, and 4 is receiving it. Got it? 1 is the idea, 2 is to contract the idea, 3 is to teach the idea, and 4 is to receive the idea. Now let's move on to the patriarchs and matriarchs. Of course, you'll say that, Lavan tricked Yaakov into marrying Leah instead of his preferred wife, Rachel, and that's why we wound up with 4 mothers. But why do we stop counting over there? Why couldn't we go on? Right? Lavan's trickery is ultimately only the proximate cause obscuring the gentlemen. You're disturbing here, please. Gentlemen? Thank you. The deeper forces at play in Jewish history, there's something much deeper here that we have to understand. What does the number 3 have to do with fathers and 4 have to do with mothers? And we're going to learn some Kabbalah for this. And here is the concept in Kabbalah, that 3 is a giver and 4 is a receiver. If you ever study the Maimer Lecha Dodi, which is what every groom and bride study before their wedding, I'm going to share with you a concept that's taught there. So in defining the act of parenthood, the creation of a child, the father and mother respectively assume the roles of father as a giver and a mother as a receiver. That doesn't mean that women don't give in the relationship and that men don't receive in the relationship. This is a Kabbalistic idea that men are literally, biologically, the man produces and gives the sperm, right? He's the initiator, and the woman receives that, and that's what 9 months of gestation formulates a child. The man just gave a little bit, and look what the woman does and develops it into. But that's a whole different story. Right now, let's just talk about this concept that even after the biological formation of a child, the same basic dynamic is often discernible in the parental styles. The father is generally more instructive, giving orders, guiding. In maybe modern times it's a little different, but the father always used to be the provider, right? Today, women are also providers. But again, just because it's a concept in halacha and in Jewish mysticism, it doesn't take away from the, modern times and whatever. The concept, let's understand the concept that in the Maimer it says, a man is called a mashpia, a giver, the contributor, and the woman is the mekabel, the one who's receiving, okay? And she is, I don't want to say consumer, but that's the concept, at least biologically speaking. So either way, by understanding, it's so much fun. The male, the father, as a giver, and the mother as the receiver, it becomes obvious. How many fathers do we have? How many patriarchs? How many fathers? 1, 2, 3 children, you and me, and many millions more. Okay, it's a song I learned in camp when I was 4 years old, 150 years ago. So you see I'm not that good with numbers, so don't rely on me here. Okay, so what number signifies giving? Let's see who remembers today's shiur. 3. Which number signifies and symbolizes receiving? 4. Okay, I'm going to share with you a vart. Giver is 3, receiver is 4. I didn't put it in here. Okay, I'm sorry. Let me read to you something from a sicha from the Rebbe. It says as follows. This is one of the explanations for the differences between the patriarchs and matriarchs, the 3 fathers and the 4 mothers. The titles father and mother relate to that which they give forth, the bringing of children into this world, the birthing of children. One of the differences between them in terms of their contribution to this process is as follows. In the father's contribution, the limbs and organs of the fetus are contained in a manner of great concealment. But it is the mother who reveals the potential by giving birth to a complete child. While both have the potential for a child, each one possesses certain biological qualities, but if the father keeps his qualities to himself or doesn't give it to the mother, that child ain't gonna come into this world, right? So we need both. Both are important. In general, in this world, we are all contributors and we are all consumers in some way or another. When I was a kid, there was a mall, a store we used to go shop at. Maybe our Bahala remembers it. They had some in the Bronx. In fact, the school I went to, Yeshiva University, was sponsored by this man. His name was Cy Sims. He had a shop called Sims. And they sold men's clothing. And on the bags, it said, an educated consumer is our best, I forget the name. Now I'm forgetting the name. An educated consumer is our best customer, something like that. I don't remember even exactly what they wanted. But as we say, we're all contributors, we're all consumers. Says the Rebbe in this talk, the father is the giver, that which is being transmitted, the child, is not yet in a defined, revealed state. Within the father is the potential of a child. But unless he gives of himself, a child won't come to be. The revelation and actualization of this transmission is through the mother. Therefore, there are 3 patriarchs, says the Rebbe, because transmission, as it exists within the giver. Remember, Gomel, giver is what letter? Gimel, which is the 3rd letter. There are 3 levels of giving. Let's go back a few slides. What are the 3 levels of giving? You have the idea. You contract the idea. Okay, so maybe you have some money. Now you have to take the money you have and you actually have to give it. What's the 4th level? Receiving. Very good. That's the 4th level. That's the mother's. So the metaphor of procreation makes clear that the 4th stage of the transmission process is actually a lot more than just receiving. Don't see yourself just as a recipient. I'm a consumer. Okay, it's not something that's simple because a child will never come to this world without that. So you're not just the target of the first 3 stages. It's the final and most important stage. Only once all 4 steps have been fulfilled that the entire transmission is ready to be realized. Without the receiver, there would be no child. In many ways, the receiver does what the giver cannot do. Right? This is such an important point that we have to realize. Without, and take charity as an example. Why God made this world this way is a separate discussion in the Talmud. But if God did not make this world in this unequal way, who could you give charity to? God made the world in such a way that there are givers and there are receivers and everything. There are people who are smarter than others and have intelligence to give. There are people who have more wisdom and have more money and have more information and more time and more. Everyone has something to give. We all have something to give. And if we can understand this, then let us go back to our 4 cups of wine, or our 3 matzahs and our 4 cups of wine. Ready? The story of the Exodus, as we said, is an extraordinary, dramatic story about the birth of our people, their miraculous emancipation from slavery, from their bondage in Egypt, and what might today be described as a national self-determination. Okay, there are modern day stories, right? Freedom of apartheid. But just like it took God took the Jews out of Egypt. It took 40 years for the Jews to take Egypt out of themselves. Maybe you could say we're only 25 years after, how many years since? Sorry, 29 years now, right? 29 years since the fall of apartheid. Give it, if in another 11 years it's not sorted out, then we're in trouble. But give it still 11 years. Hasidus tells us, if we look at the story of the Exodus, there's an intriguing spin that we could understand and appreciate and emphasize in the fact that the Jewish people were actually far from ready for the redemption. It was a process. And that process took time. It didn't happen overnight. A country takes some time to go away from, you have to make it relevant to our modern day stories as well. So let's see, in the words of Rabbi Avram Saba, I want to read to you something that he says, something fascinating. He says, it appears that this may be understood from the sage's statement that this matzah, we say at the Seder, matzah zu sha'anu eichlin, this matzah we eat because of what reason? And then we say because our fathers though did not have time to become leavened, because Hashem hurried them, rushed them out of Egypt. There was no time for the bread to break, for the bread to bake. And therefore, today we remember it by eating matzah, flat bread. What does it have to do? What is the redemption that God redeemed through the baking of dough? What is the significance of the matzah in this whole story? So he says the intent here is that the Jewish people resided in Egypt for a considerable amount of time until they intermingled amongst the Egyptians and learned from their behavior. But Almighty God, in the merit of the forefathers and an account of his kindness, gave them a few mitzvahs, the Korban Pesach, the matzah, the maror, so they would help them come out of Egypt when the time came, especially the matzahs, which symbolize freedom. So we have to understand how matzah symbolizes freedom. And if God had not redeemed them at that time with his mitzvahs and his kindness to break the powers of impurity, there were 49 powers of tumah, of the evil inclination of the Satan, who wished to cause their internal figurative dough to leaven. Remember, the leavening of the dough is also symbolic of the unwanted character traits that we possess, our ego. And so just as only a hair's breadth separates matzah, chametz from matzah, the matzah baking process is so meticulous and so precise, if it's not done properly, it can become chametz so easily. That is why in Chabad we are so particularly strict not to mix anything with our matzah, just in case there's an unbaked particle of flour. That's it. So if the Jewish people remain in Egypt for just one more moment, their internal figurative dough could have turned into chametz. They could have been doomed. They would have sunken further into the Egyptian depravity. They would be imprisoned and trapped in Egypt forever, and they would have never been redeemed. The teachings of Kabbalah state that at the time of the liberation, the Jewish people were at the 49th gate of tumah, of impurity, so deeply submerged and immersed in this impurity that that one more moment of it could have been devastating. So therefore, we are told that ultimate level of impurity, the 50th gate, is truly the point of no return. And had the Jewish people sunk that far, they would have never been able to emerge from their bondage in Egypt. And therefore, God acted to extract his people with haste, to swoop in from above and schlep them out, ready or not. More than it was a story of self-determination, the act of Exodus was ultimately God's story. If he hadn't taken us out, what do we say in the Diana song? We'd still be there. So it's this aspect of the Exodus story, the top-down nature of our liberation, that the matzah represents. The matzah is deliberately kept simple. What just happened? We ran out of steam here. That's it. It only lasts a little bit. We got a lot of things connected. Done. We're still online though. We're still in the, yeah. All right. The point is, the matzah is deliberately kept simple. Going back to the ingredients that you were asking before, if the ingredients are as important as the time, The matzah is simple. It's unseasoned. There's no flavor. It's poor man's bread, just flour and water to reflect that spiritual poverty of sorts. We are not dealing with a people whose initial commitment to God was born of a rich inner religious experience that could only come later once they were already out. For someone with a sense for the spiritual and without any appreciation for Torah mitzvahs, a meaningful engagement with Judaism can only begin by first breaking free of a purely materialistic life outlook. And matzah, my friends, represents that leap of faith, that simplicity. It's the bread of faith that our ancestors were willing to leave Egypt without any provisions. That's what it's about. So my friends, I'm going to conclude here. You can't even see the rest of the slides, right? So let me just quickly see if there's any particular slides I want to conclude today's lesson with. You know what, let's conclude here. What I'll try to do maybe in the morning is to give you some final closing thoughts of what we discussed today. And we are going to move on to some other ideas to get ready for Pesach. Please God, I think our last shiur will be next Monday. And then after Pesach, I will be back either Tuesday or Wednesday. I'm not going to be on Monday after Pesach. I'll either be back Tuesday or Wednesday. I will let you know. Look out for my WhatsApps. So Monday after Pesach. Cynthia, are you keen to be here on the Monday after Pesach? Because then we could still have the program on. The 17th. This coming Monday, you'll be here. What about Monday, the 17th of April? No, you're away? Oh. Okay, so we won't have a shiur unless you want to do it. Well, we're having our Pesach break will resume. Please God, on Tuesday the 18th. Hopefully Tuesday the 18th. But look out for my message. Huh? Hi. Yeah. Please God, Tuesday the 18th of April. I will communicate with you by WhatsApp. Last year, I was a little bit exhausted after the day. It may have been COVID because we had some COVID going on, but we won't talk about that. But hopefully we'll be fine. But I'm only getting back on the 17th and I'm actually moving that week. So I'll be a little bit chaotic, but I will try to give the shiur unless we're moving. Who knows what's happening? I will communicate by WhatsApp and let you know, but we'll be here still through next Monday. There will not be a shiur next Tuesday or Wednesday. Maybe even Dr. Stern, Dr. Andy Stern, who's been here, Adam Stern. Is it Adam or Andy? I'm forgetting his name now. Andy. He will be here, I think, tomorrow. Yes, the Dr. Stern will be here tomorrow, and I think he wants to come next Monday as well. So if you want, we could have our full program all the way through next Monday, and then we will close until the Tuesday after Pesach. What's that? Erev Pesach is Wednesday. First night. Tuesday night, Monday, I'll be going up to the hotel, please. So Cynthia will be here to do memory class. I will, please God, give you the class, and we will give out matzah next Monday to everyone who hasn't yet received. All right, Zaykusent, everybody. Have a wonderful day. Enjoy the birthday cake for lunch. Thank you so much, Miriam, for the power. Thank you so much, Gail, for the internet. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here, and all the best.